Coming up, the spark that launched a revolution.
He became a European-wide phenomenon.
And the hero who became an outlaw.
He said, this is like my Palm Sunday. I think I'm going to go to my execution in a week.
How Martin Luther stood up to the church.
He was not going to be quiet.
And created the modern world.
And here I stand. I can do nothing else.
We mark the 500th anniversary of the Reformation on today's 700 Club.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. Once a special prosecutor is appointed, they have virtually unlimited license to go hunting after anybody they want to. Why an official in the Justice Department called for one of those and put Mueller in that position, I never know. But it was a terrible thing. I don't think he's going after Trump because he can't get him. Trump, frankly, is unassailable, and from what I understand, Mueller is not going after Trump. But he sure did stick it to Manafort, Paul Manafort, who was a fixture in Washington. They're getting him for something that he did years ago, and the fact that this guy can go delving into records for decades back, I think is a travesty. But nevertheless, he's loose. And now he's talking about going after the brother of Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. So Podesta, and Podesta is a well-known fixture. And what is the charge? The charge is they didn't register as agents of a foreign government if they were doing work for them. And this is a charge that has seldom been brought, and it's resulted, I think, in one conviction over the years. But that doesn't mean that these people won't have to spend millions of dollars and have their reputation assailed. Yeah. And,
that's Podesta is the brother of Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, right?
That's right, Tony Podesta, and he is a fixture in Washington. He's very rich, has a villa in Italy and a lovely apartment or house in Washington. He's made a lot of money, and he gives away a lot of money. And there's nothing really wrong with that. He's a fixer, and he's represented some of the same people that Manafort. Yeah. But it used to be in the old days, it was Black, Manafort, and Stone. They were the three power brokers during the Bush administration. And Roger Stone, I don't know what in the world he's doing, but he's been somewhat discredited. I don't know where Black is these days. He was a consultant, but Paul Manafort has been a fixture forever, and Trump wanted him during the convention because he was good at assembling delegates. He put him in as chairman of his campaign, but he was in for a short period and then came out. So I don't know.
So he is President Trump's former campaign chairman, and he's now facing a 12-count indictment. Eric Rosales brings us the story from Washington.
The first charges from special counsel Robert Mueller were outlined in this 31-page indictment as part of the ongoing investigation of Russian interference in the election. In Mueller's crosshairs, Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman, and deputy campaign manager Rick Gates. Both men arrived for their first federal court appearance Monday, where they pleaded not guilty to all charges. The 12-count indictment details Manafort's lobbying work in Ukraine and what prosecutors claim was a scheme to hide money from tax collectors and the public. The indictment states Manafort used his hidden overseas wealth to enjoy a lavish lifestyle in the United States without paying taxes on that income. Authorities say Manafort laundered more than $18 million. Gates is accused of transferring more than $3 million from offshore accounts. The two are also charged with making false statements. Kevin Downing, who represents Manafort, called the indictment against his client ridiculous.
President Donald Trump was correct. There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government.
It's important to note the indictment makes no mention of President Trump or election meddling. Manafort has repeatedly denied collusion, including his time as Trump's campaign chairman.
Are there any ties between Mr. Trump, you or your campaign, and Putin and his regime? No, there are not. It's absurd, and there's no basis to it.
Separately, one of President Trump's early foreign policy campaign advisors, George Papadopoulos, pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about meeting with a professor who had ties to the Kremlin. Papadopoulos told agents the conversation happened before he joined Mr. Trump's campaign, when in fact it occurred afterward. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders held firm to the White House stance of no campaign collusion.
We've been saying from day one there's been no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, and nothing in the indictment today changes that at all.
Both men are under house arrest, with Manafort's bond set at $10 million and Gates at $5 million. The president's Twitter response pointed in another direction, writing, "Sorry, but this is years ago, before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus?" Sarah Huckabee Sanders ended her White House briefing stating the real collusion scandal has everything to do with the Clinton campaign and the Washington strategic firm Fusion GPS and Russia, claiming there is clear evidence of them colluding to spread disinformation and smear the president. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I said it yesterday, I say it again. We're facing an existential threat from the North Koreans, who are getting nuclear weapons that could reach the United States of America. We then would face nuclear blackmail. The Iranians are trying to build a nuclear device that might threaten Israel and the Middle East. We have trade issues here in this United States with China and other countries that are very important. We're trying to get tax relief for the American people. We need a health care overhaul because Obamacare is seriously broken. We have a debt of $20 trillion plus that are weighing heavily on all of us. We have domestic problems, we have overseas problems. And to be wasting our time on this business about what did the Russians do in the past election, who cares? It really doesn't matter. And I think the intelligent people in America would be just as relieved if Trump said, I'm going to pardon everybody that has any suspicion of anything having to do with Russia. They get a blanket pardon from me now or in the future, and that would shut this thing down. There was an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal suggesting just that very thing. But the American people say the President of the United States has got to be free from these annoyances so he can run the country. We have crucial issues that face all of us as Americans, and we need help. And the fact that these Russians did or did not get involved or talk to somebody along the way is really, well, it's just not very consequential. But by Rosenzweig putting on a special counsel without the permission of the president, the Attorney General had recused himself, so this the Deputy Attorney General made this decision and then gave broad powers to this special prosecutor. Trump, obviously he works for Trump, and Trump could scale him back, but something's got to be done. You cannot have somebody with a fishing expedition, an unlimited checkbook, going after everybody he can get his hands on and bringing down all this publicity. We, as Americans, have got to do something better. And it's key we do it. And I think, you know, I see some of these Democrats saying, well, we want to pass a law that says he can't change the special prosecutor. Well, the special prosecutor was put in place by a person who reported to Trump. He was one of Trump's team, if you will. And I think he did the president a great disservice. And if it was me and any other business, I would have fired him in a heartbeat. But Trump, you know, didn't do that. But the time's got to come that he says, this is enough, we've got to shut this thing down. I hope and pray that that's what the result's going to be, although there'll be a great outcry by the Democrats that he should do it. But he's got every right to do what he has, because he's president of the United States. We need a strong leader to bring us through these crises that we're facing. Well, in other news, could we see big changes in the role Islam plays in Saudi Arabia? Amazing. John Jessup has that.
Thanks, Pat. The question some are asking is, can Saudi Arabia be reformed? The country's future leader says he hopes so, but as Dale Hurd reports, that's likely much easier said than done.
Saudi Arabia's young crown prince wants to bring a kinder and gentler Islam to the Desert Kingdom. But trying to make it happen could be not only tough, but dangerous. Since coming to power, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been trying to move Saudi Arabia away from Wahhabism, a literal version of Islam so repressive that it's compared to the ideology of ISIS. Many call it a source of modern Islamic terrorism. The prince's reform plan is part of a program called Vision 2030, intended to remake the Saudi economy and society and to construct a futuristic economic district along the Red Sea coast, costing $500 billion. But reforming Wahhabism will be a major challenge. It's been Saudi Arabia's dominant brand of Islam since its beginning. Apostasy is punishable by death. Women have few rights and only just recently gained the right to drive cars. The open practice of Christianity is illegal. Public beheadings have been routine. Crown Prince Mohammed told the London Guardian newspaper he will return Saudi Arabia to moderate Islam and open the country to all religions.
Only want to go back to what we were, the moderate Islam that is open to the world, open to all the religions.
Mohammed is said to have already sidelined Wahhabi religious leaders who enforce the kingdom's extreme form of Islam. And he believes demographics are on his side.
70% of the Saudi people are less than 30 years old. And quite frankly, we will not waste 30 years of our lives in dealing with extremist ideas. We will destroy them today.
But danger abounds. The last time social reform was attempted in 1979, militants seized the Grand Mosque for 15 days and called for the overthrow of the House of Saud. Hundreds died before commandos reclaimed the site. The same hardline spirit that resisted reform almost 40 years ago is still strong in Saudi Arabia today and could fight to prevent the kind of change the prince wants to bring. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Pat, back to you.
Well, when Ibn Saud was a territorial chieftain fighting to get control of what became Saudi Arabia, the name Saudi is after Saud, it was Arabia. And he teamed up with the extreme Wahhab people who practice an extreme form of Mohammedanism or Islam, and they helped put him in power. And there's been that relationship ever since. The secular people run the country, and they turn the religious stuff over to the Wahhabis. And to take that away, to me, is going to bring about a revolution and very possibly a threat on the Crown Prince's life. I think they would try to assassinate him, and every time he turned around, there would be some assassin in some dark alley waiting to gun him down. So I think that's what it'll bring about it. And the House of Saud has been very reluctant to do anything against the Wahhabis because they have supported the monarchy. And the monarchy rests again on a small family that run a big country that has all kinds of people in it and is under assault by the Iranians and the Shias who would like to take power. So, you know, it's a cauldron, and to step into that, I mean, he's a very courageous man, but it might cost his life. John?
Pat, a federal judge has blocked most of President Trump's policy banning transgender Americans from serving in the military. The president announced the policy in a tweet last July. He also said the military would not pay for transgender surgeries and later issued a formal presidential memorandum giving the Department of Defense 6 months to implement the new rule. Several transgender military personnel sued to block the policy, and for the most part, the judge agreed, but he allowed to leave in place the provision of not paying for surgeries. There are an estimated 2,500 transgender service members on active duty. Pat, back to you.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, you've got a district court judge who was appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. These judges are issuing decrees that affect the entire United States. I don't think that our Constitution ever intended for a single district court judge to have enough power out of Hawaii or the District of Columbia or wherever they're sitting to make changes in the entire policy of the United States and to overrule the decrees of the elected president. There's something wrong with this, but they have taken power that I don't think the Constitution gave them. And I think it's time for Congress to delineate. Congress can withdraw the appellate jurisdiction of anything it wants to, according to the Constitution. And I think there's something wrong with the system where a tiny jurisdictional district court judge can suddenly reach out and say, well, I'm going to control the entire United States of America. It's wrong. Now, there's some good news about the confirmation of one particular judge, and let's hear about that from John.
Well, Pat, the Senate has confirmed Amy Barrett of Indiana to be a United States judge for the 7th Circuit. Barrett made headlines during her confirmation hearing when California Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein raised concerns over Barrett's Catholic religious beliefs, telling the nominee, quote, "The dogma lives loudly within you." Republican senators joined Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell ahead of Barrett's confirmation vote to say they think Feinstein's comments were unacceptable and unconstitutional.
We stoop pretty low if we start to raise questions of religious belief before somebody can serve on the federal judiciary.
And the Republican senators say they're speaking out against these questions now because they fear they're becoming part of the new normal. Well, another big accomplishment for the Regent University School of Law, it had the highest rate of passage for the bar exam out of all Virginia law schools in July this year. More than 94% of Regent alumni passed the Virginia bar. That's higher than the 92% from the University of Virginia, the nearly 85% from Washington and Lee University, and the 79% from George Mason University and the University of Richmond. Law School Dean Michael Hernandez attributes the success to what he calls the team effort of Regent School of Law. And Pat, along with the moot court success, a lot of big wins for Regent University School of Law.
Well, we're delighted because that bar passage, Virginia has the 3rd hardest bar in the United States. Its first is New York, then California, then Virginia, as I understood it. And so a professor named Randy Singer, who has written a bar course, and I think he's teaching that the big thing about that bar is that you've got to deal with every question. If you write and write and write on one question, you get marked down. And so these people have to get trained as to how to take the bar. And Regent is beginning to concentrate on that. And this win, #1 in the state, is a big deal. And I congratulate Dean Hernandez and the team there at Regent. And it's just one more success. Regent is now, and I say this advisedly, it is the fastest growing university in the entire United States of America. And the statistics are enormously skewed toward what Regent is doing. So the Lord has blessed this school, and the accomplishments of the graduates are just tremendous. But they're up against the University of Virginia, Washington and Lee, George Mason, William and Mary, University of Richmond, et cetera. And that was a great win, so we congratulate them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're on the other side of what is called the Reformation. There was the Renaissance, was the awakening of the humanistic knowledge of the arts and the science that came about. But along with it was the Reformation, which was a religious initiative, and Terry's going to tell us about it.
That's right. Well, coming up 500 years ago today, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral.
This was an announcement calling people to debate about indulgences and forgiveness and the grace of God.
This was never meant to be what we think of it as, this holy moment in history where he defies the church.
relive the events leading up to the Reformation, and separate the myths from the man, Martin Luther, when we come back.
Hey, you're watching the 700 Club. So glad to have you with us. Today, Christians all over the world are celebrating the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. And the monk who made it all possible, Martin Luther. By the way, there was a well-known civil rights leader who was named after Martin Luther King. In part 2 of our special series, we examine what the Reformation was really all about, beginning with the 95 Theses.
On October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther, a Catholic monk and university professor, nailed 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral in Germany in response of the church's sale of indulgences. This single act is one of the most profound, yet misunderstood moments in Christian history and started the Reformation.
The Castle Church was the Prince's church. It was the official church. Big, beautiful church. The door to that church served kind of like the bulletin board for the whole town. It's where announcements were put up. And so this was an announcement tacked on the bulletin board calling people to debate. What Luther was asking for was an academic debate about indulgences and forgiveness and the grace of God.
This was never meant to be what we think of it as, this holy moment in history where he defies the church and pounds the theses onto the castle church door. Not at all. He was simply saying, it's time to have a debate on this subject. If we have a debate, it'll give an airing out of the views, and it will lead us to begin discussing what really badly needs discussing.
These were all problems that could be solved. And they were concerns that he shared with many other people in the church, both clergy and laity. It was not a revolutionary document.
What really caused the trouble was when Luther said, you know what, I better send a copy of these debate points along with a letter to the Archbishop who has sanctioned these indulgences. He needs to know.
Church authorities condemned Luther's theses, but his writings quickly found an audience. His 95 Theses and other sermons were mass printed on the newly invented Gutenberg press.
And before you know it, in a matter of months, really, Luther became a household word. And the Reformation became something that could not be avoided. Everybody was talking about Luther and his protest against indulgences all the way from Lisbon in Portugal to Lithuania, already over nearly in Russia. He became a European-wide phenomenon.
And Luther was a very effective and prolific writer. He could write very well in both German and in Latin, and he published a lot of documents, a lot of tracts and sermons immediately following his 95 Theses.
He became a voice for the people, a voice for the common man. Now, if you look at history, and this is huge, there had never been a voice for the common man. There was no common man. There was no vox populi. There was no voice of the people. Who were the people? There was the power, there was the power structure, and then there were peasants. The idea that the people could have a voice, it was really unthinkable.
Luther's 95 Theses spoke against the sale of indulgences. But more importantly, he was calling the church to turn back to Jesus and the Scriptures as the source of doctrine and truth.
It says that the true treasury of the church is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's not the merits of the saints. It's not any good works that I can build up and put in my bank account in heaven. It's not indulgences that I might buy. The true treasury of the church is nothing other than the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ.
Luther was deeply interested in is a return to the vibrancy of the early church. The church that for 300 years shared the gospel, became witnesses of the power of the Spirit, and overcame the Roman Empire. This is what Luther was interested in, a reformation backwards.
There were lots of abuses in the Catholic Church, but I will have to say, the Reformation was not about just cleaning out those abuses. That's often how the Reformation story is told. But remember, there were lots of reformers before Luther was ever born who wanted to take the broom and sweep out those abuses. Luther was about something else. Luther's Reformation was about something deeper. What the Reformation was about fundamentally was about the Word of God. But what Word and what God?
Martin Luther, for every single question, would go back to the Scriptures themselves. And he asked these questions, and he said, well, the doctors of the church have said this, the councils have said the following, church leaders, including the Pope of that time, have said the following. But what do the Scriptures themselves say? And here we find Martin Luther's great contribution to the early Reformation, this idea of Scripture alone. We have to go back to the inspired Word of God to judge everything within the church. Every question that we have, whether this is appropriate or whether this is true, Luther would say, let us go back to the Scriptures themselves.
He was earnestly trying to help the church be the church of God. He was never against the church, and as things progressed, people started arguing with Luther. In the course of the arguing, he became more and more sure of his position, and he said bolder and bolder things. He took theological steps that he never intended to take by saying that, oh, by the way, the church councils have erred in the past. The papal decrees have been in error. Things that clearly they would have seen as heretical. They doubled down and increasingly told him, if you do not recant, if you do not take back what you've said, you're doing damage. You will be excommunicated, you will be labeled a heretic, you will be labeled an outlaw by the Holy Roman Emperor.
The church would engage in the civil government of this time and call, of course, for not only an investigation, but a condemnation of Luther and the points that he made.
The initial reform of Luther was not to break away from the church, but was to change it and get rid of these abuses. And it was in 1520 that he actually decided that the church could no longer be reformed, that he had to make a clean break from it. The Pope excommunicated him and gave him a certain amount of time to recant. He waited until the very last day and then took the Pope's bull along with books of canon law and had a bonfire with all his students in Wittenberg, and they burned it all.
In 1521, the Roman Emperor Charles V, princes and leaders of the church gathered for the imperial diet at Worms, Germany. Luther was granted safe passage and given one last opportunity to recant. For the authorities, Luther was a heretic. To the common man, he was a celebrity.
When the Diet of Worms happens, Luther is treated like a hero. He said, this is like my Palm Sunday. I think I'm going to go to my execution in a week, because the adulation, people were just, you know, they would have been taking photographs of him if they'd had iPhones. I mean, they were just crazy to catch a glimpse of this hero. It created a sensation. So he was really, in some ways, the first celebrity in the history of the world. So this went way past what any of the authorities thought was possible. They had never seen a phenomenon like Martin Luther.
At Worms, the empire confronted Luther with his own writings critical of the Pope and church councils.
Martin Luther, these papers on the table in front of you, they are familiar to you. In fact, are you not the author of every single work on this table?
I am. Are you going to recant or not? I can't recant. I am unable. Truth and my love of God prevent me from simply recanting. Unless you show me precisely where I have erred, I have to abide by what I have said.
I am open to recant, he would say, if you could show this to me within the Scriptures. And then right at the end, he makes this extraordinary statement. He says, and here I stand, I can do nothing else. And what he's really saying is, I can only stand on the truth and the veracity and the power of God's Word.
And that's this moment when we remember him standing against the Pope, standing against the Holy Roman Emperor.
And it's a very dramatic and brave moment because, again, he's surrounded by all the power of the empire. And we know what happened to Jan Hus 100 years earlier, is when he was excommunicated and condemned, he was put to death.
He feared God more than he feared what man could do to him. And so all of the worldly power arrayed against him meant nothing to him. He said, I know that God has called me to speak these things. I don't fear what the church or the king or the emperor can do to me. I fear not speaking what God has entrusted me with speaking. This is a holy calling. That level of faith is so inspiring. When you see somebody who knows God is real and who knows God's truth is real and beautiful and great and glorious, and that nothing would be worse than being quiet when I should speak out. He was not going to be quiet.
Here I stand. I can do no other. So help me God.
After making his stand on the Word of God, Luther left the Diet of Worms an outlaw in the eyes of the Church and the Roman Empire. His fate and message now rested in the hands of God.
Remarkable, Terry.
Very remarkable. Well, that was part 2 of our series on Martin Luther, the Reformation. The third and final part is coming up on tomorrow's 700 Club. We have all 3 parts available on this new DVD. It's called Martin Luther, the Reformation, and we're going to send it to you for a gift of just $10. To order your DVD, all you have to do is call the number on your screen. It's 1-800-700-7000. Or you can log on to cbn.com, but it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have in your library.
You know, there was asked of me, what is the most important thing that happened in history? And I think the invention of printing was probably number 1, but the Reformation is obviously right beside it because they coincided. And with printing, the message of Luther got publicity all over the whole Roman Empire. And with that printing, then people began to read the Bible. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing that the Lord let all those things happen at the same time. It was a sovereign work of God, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Another reason why you want to have your copy.
Amen.
Well, up next, a man who was 5 years old when he began talking to the dead from a makeshift coffin.
And I didn't call them demons. They were my friends. My friends said, would you let us come inside you?
See what happened next. That's coming up.
As a child, Tim Thompson didn't wait for Halloween to act scary. At the age of 5, this young man, just a little boy, fashioned a makeshift coffin for himself. He climbed in the coffin, and day after day, year after year, he talked to his dead brother and a legion of demons.
I heard a pop, and I heard the crack of the ice break. And then that's when it happened. Immediately, I was submerged. The last thing I really remember is my brother ran over to me, grabbed me, and threw me up on the ice.
Tim Thompson was only 5 years old when he fell through the ice on a frozen lake. His brother Paul pulled him to safety, but then he fell in and drowned in the frigid water.
Probably about a week to 2 weeks after my brother's funeral, I laid down on a floor and in my closet, and I put a blanket up to my chest, and I was pretending to lay in a coffin talking to my brother.
Tim hid in his makeshift coffin day after day. As days turned into months, demons started visiting him.
And I didn't call them demons because I didn't even know what those were, so they were my friends. I was literally communicating with them in my pretend coffin.
Tim's friends made him an offer.
My friends said, would you let us come inside you? And we will show you greater things. And so when I said yes, that moment I could tell I was not the same person. I could speak something out of my mouth, like, say for instance, if a sibling was mean to me, or if somebody did something to me, I could literally ask one of my friends to trip them, to have them be cut, or to get hurt. Well, little by little, come to find out, this power that I was speaking over people's lives was growing.
When Tim was 10 years old, he had demonic visions.
My father was yelling at me, and we got into an argument, and I saw myself pick up an axe and drive it into his skull. and I saw his head be split open, and I saw the blood, and I saw everything else. And I literally saw this. And that's when I started to realize I'm not like other people.
As a teenager, Tim delved deeper into the occult. He used tarot cards and Ouija boards to communicate with demons. Many of Tim's demon friends had names, such as Ra.
When Ra spoke, all the demons shook, because they all knew he had enormous power. I knew he had enormous power, because Ra let me know that he literally stands before Lucifer and talks to him.
Tim also began to abuse all kinds of drugs.
But I literally dived right into meth. And then from meth, I got into cocaine. And by the time I was 19 years of age, I had such a severe cocaine habit, an alcohol habit.
Neither drugs nor the occult could fill the void in Tim's life. He tried to kill himself by cutting his wrists.
Suddenly, blood went. I literally felt that I'm paying God back. I don't know exactly what happened, but I ended up in an emergency room, and a doctor said you were 1 minute away from bleeding to death.
Tim had decided if there was nothing better to life, he would rather die. That's when he called out to God.
Close to midnight on December the 13th, I got down on my hands and knees and I said, God, if you're real, then kill me or you show me some sort of happiness, but I don't want to live one more day like this. And that's when it happened. But Jesus came through my ceiling. He came through my ceiling. The whole room lit up. He embraced me. And when he embraced me, he let me know that he found value in me and he loved me.
Tim asked Jesus to come into his heart.
For the very first time, anger, fear, depression, suicidal, homicidal, hating everything and hating life was gone. I didn't just have a taste of hope. I had a tidal wave of hope. I had a tidal wave of forgiveness. I knew standing before him, I was really loved. He really accepted me. He really cared about the real me.
Tim doesn't entertain demons anymore or read tarot cards. Instead, he turns to God's Word.
Jesus Christ is the answer. He's not a symbol. He's not a figurine. He is a real human being that's got his arms wide open. And all you got to do is say, Jesus, Jesus, forgive me for my sin.
It's Halloween. People talk about demons and goblins. They dress up as spooks and corpses and skeletons and parade around. But let me tell you, demons are real. They're fallen spirits. The Bible says that Satan took a third of the angels, and they have come to earth, and they hate human beings made in the image of God, and they want to destroy and kill. Jesus said the thief comes to kill and to destroy, but I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. The devil has come to kill and destroy. It's not cute to play with tarot cards. It's not cute to go into seances. It isn't cute to play with the occult. This isn't a parlor game. This is real. These demons are real. And Tim was a man who let them come in, and they gave him a measure of power, but they also gave him misery, and he wanted to die. Now, ladies and gentlemen, right now, if you have been dealing with the occult, I want you to call upon the name of the Lord. He is more powerful than any demon. The devils are subject to his power. All authority in heaven and earth has been given unto me, Jesus said. All authority. He has authority over Satan. He has authority over demons. He has authority over sickness and disease. He has authority over everything. And if you invite him to come into your life, he'll give you joy and peace that'll go on forever. And if you want that blessing, I want you to pray with me right now. And whatever you're doing having to do with the occult, I want you to deny it, I want you to rebuke it, and I want you to take Jesus as the answer. So pray with me right now, wherever you are. Pray these words. Jesus, that's right, pray with me. Jesus, I know that you are the Son of God. I know that all power in heaven and earth is yours. I know that the Father has given you all things, and what belongs to the Father is yours. And so I come to you now, Jesus, and I ask that you would come into my life, take over my life. And at this moment, Jesus, I rebuke Satan, I rebuke the forces of evil, I turn my back on any of the occult, and I confess to you that this is sin, and I rebuke Satan in the name of Jesus at this moment, and I command Satan to leave me. And I ask, Lord, that you would come in, fill me with yourself, and from this moment on, I will live for you and I will serve you. Come now, Lord. From this moment on, I'm yours. Thank you for hearing my prayer, and thank you for coming into my heart. Now, for those who prayed with me, I have something called Angels, Demons, and the End Times. It's a little pamphlet. I'll be glad to give it to you. You just pick up your phone, call in, but I want you to, if you prayed with me just then, I want you to just say, I prayed with Pat, I have given my heart to the Lord, and I am free. I am free because the Lord has set me free. 1-800-700-7000. Call right now. Let's go to Terry.
Still ahead, meet the woman who created an outreach to London's rich and famous and then far beyond. Shaneen Clark joins us live coming up on today's 700 Club.
Welcome back to Washington for this CBN News Break. Christian author and speaker Lysa TerKeurst says she has breast cancer, making the announcement on Facebook Monday. The president of Proverbs 31 Ministries said doctors spotted the mass during a routine mammogram. The news comes shortly after TerKeurst announced she would be divorcing her husband of 25 years because of infidelity. Now, despite the hard-hitting news, the Christian speaker says she feels good and asks other Christians to pray for her healing. Well, should Christian believers celebrate Halloween? Some believe it can be taken back like other holidays, but a former Satanist who is now a pastor says no, Christians shouldn't celebrate Halloween. John Ramirez told CBN News that he once sacrificed animals as part of satanic rituals. He also says that he used to talk with the devil just like he talks to people today. Ramirez adds his friends even called him Lucifer's son. He warns there are family curses associated with celebrating Halloween and urges Christians to close the door on those curses. And to find out how he says Christians can do that, you can watch his interview and get the rest of today's top headlines by visiting cbnnews.com. We'll be back with more of today's 700 Club right after this.
Shaneen Clark travels the globe speaking to political leaders in countries such as England, Finland, Norway, France, Italy, Romania, and Spain. Take a look.
Shaneen Clark is from a Hindu Punjabi background. At age 14, she was engaged through an arranged marriage. She became a Christian and got out of the engagement. However, a few years later, she married and ended up in an abusive relationship. Now, Shaneen has put the past behind her and helps people reach their full potential. She holds events at London's top venues, where dignitaries like Tony Blair, Princess Michael of Kent, and former Member of Parliament Jonathan Aitken have attended. Shaneen has been speaking to governments across Europe. She believes there is hope for all nations, including America.
Please welcome back to the 700 Club, Shaneen Clark. Shaneen, good to see you.
Good to be back with you,
God
Pat.
Bless you. Hey, let me ask you, before we start talking about what you're doing, your background, Hindu, tell me about it. Punjabi, what?
Well, I was born in London, and my parents are obviously of Indian origin, Punjabi background.
Yes.
Yes. Hindu, Sikh, Punjabi background.
Would they raise you in that culture or not?
Well, my father, actually, being in England, we were exposed a lot to Christianity. So my heritage would be Hinduism. Sikhism. So some of our ancestors worshipped the idols.
Did they try to force you into that?
No, because I was brought up in England. I went to Sunday school at a very young age, and my father...
Oh, you did? So
yes. So I never worshipped idols. I grew up really believing in Christ.
Tell me about the calling you've got to talk to leaders. When did that happen?
Well, just recently, in the recent years, I've been speaking a lot to political leaders.
Yeah.
And I'm off to Italy to speak in Congress next week on a new subject called femicide. Femicide.
Was that killing women?
It is, actually. I had to look it up. I thought, my goodness, what on earth is this? You know, because I was quite surprised when I Googled it, that it's women killing women. So hate crime's really increasing. So this is something new I'm doing right now, Pat, going into Congress.
Good grief.
Standing for justice.
What are these Europeans, what do you see in their spiritual life? What's going on over there?
Globally or personally?
Just take Europe for now, start.
Europe? Well, I've been travelling across Europe a lot this year, to Finland, Italy, Norway, and what I'm seeing is in Europe, because we've got the Brexit going on right now, as you know, and increasingly we're becoming more of a nationalist country. And of course, we're affected by the past post-war structures, which has brought this on. And we have increasingly new structures and policies come into place that bring in political correctness. So, of course, the church is very persecuted right now. We have an identity crisis.
The church is persecuted in Europe?
Yes, it is.
The church or Christian?
The church on the whole. I mean, you've got to be very careful what you say, what you stand for. You know, so Christian leaders have to be very clear about how they're dealing with transgender, how they're dealing with...
Where did that stuff come from, do you think? What's the origin of it?
The origin of all of this mess comes from the fall, we know, but in our current status, we're looking at young people. We're exposed to so much. I don't think as a nation, even America, we have a clear identity of what we stand for in our mission. Who are we? So the young people, the young millennials are trying to figure out who are we? What am I trying to become? And we need to be clear about what we stand for. And I think there's a real mix-up, mixed messages, clear gospel. What is our mission? What is our gender? I mean, we've got problems with that right now, haven't we?
What is our gender?
Yes, we've got a gender crisis going on in young people in Europe.
We're just doing a series on Martin Luther because this is the Reformation, 500 years. And he said, "Here I stand." Is anybody standing now for the truth that you find?
There are people standing. One of the great things about Europe right now, even though there's a rise of great darkness in our age, there also is a rise of great voices. Not known voices. They're voices of everyday people's lives that are standing and coming together because the church is angry. You know, the people are wanting to stand. And I think the persecution will actually cause the church to actually take a stand today and dare to step up and not be quietened. Because you see Martin Luther in the Reformation, he had to stand out. He had to bring it on. We have to say, bring it on. The darker the age that we live in, the greater the anointing and the fulfillment of God's promise in the church will happen. I think, you know, today we're seeing a rise in many different aspects of ISIS, and you can see what we deal with, you know, with Spain. We've got problems with Brexit, and of course you've got Trump in power right now, and people are not sure.
Tell me about him. What do you think?
What do I think of Trump?
Yeah.
Well, I think he's God's man right now. I think God's allowed him in.
Yeah. Why?
I think, you know, he's brought Christians into the White House, and I think that's great. As long as they have the right motives, and as long as they have the right, they don't have their own agendas, they're going to be fine. And Trump is no fool. He'll see that. Right now, he needs support. And I think if people are listening right now and don't like him, we need to repent because we're called to pray for our leaders.
Sure.
And we need to pray for him.
Are you seeing the supernatural power of God at work in you?
Oh, I am. What's so wonderful, Pat, is I grew up reading Catherine Kuhlman's book, you know. Never met her or heard her. And when I did, obviously, she was quite freaky for me because I didn't know, but she carried such an anointing. And today I'm traveling and I'm seeing the supernatural power of God touch and heal people. Just in Norway, I was there recently. There's so many miracles. And I was in Portland, Oregon, the very unchurched state of America. And the Holy Spirit moved powerfully, touching people. And I think we need the power of the supernatural, the authenticity of the real gospel back. The young people needed to see it. They want something real, tangible.
Amen. You know, we're running out of time. I'd love to talk to you forever because it's so fascinating. But May the Lord bless you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you for being with us.
It's great to be back on with
Good
you.
to see you. You're a blessing. Well, folks, we leave you with today's Power Minute from Luke. I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Well, that's all the time we've got. We'll see you tomorrow. Pat Boone joins us live on the 700 Club tomorrow. We'll see you then. Bye-bye. God bless you.